Welcome to Bite Size, a series where I take a short look at a short game. I am trying to keep these under 10 minutes, so we'll see how this one goes. Kirby's Dream Land for the Game Boy is the first in the long-running Kirby series, releasing in 1992. It also marked the debut of the career of one Masahiro Sakurai. You may have heard of him. He made a bit of a splash in the gaming community with his Super Smash Bros. Series, but we're gonna go back and see how his initial efforts fared. Sakurai designed Kirby's Dream Land to be easy to pick up and play, targeting a less experienced audience, which goes a long way towards explaining the cutesy character designs and simplistic gameplay. It's also the shortest game I've covered in this bite-sized series, with both of my playthroughs clocking in at just under 27 minutes. Kirby's Dream Land is one of many Game Boy titles that never received the DX treatment on the Game Boy Color, so we can thank huderlem and GreenAndACat for creating the Kirby's Dream Land DX patch, bringing the game into color that feels authentic to the rest of the series. They even separated it into two versions, one for OG hardware and one for emulators. You can tell this shade of pink on the OG version is too bright when emulated, so just make sure to pick the proper version when you apply the patch. One aspect of the gameplay that might shock you is that Kirby lacks his copy ability in this game. He can still inhale enemies, items, and projectiles and shoot them back at other foes, or swallow them. But his copy ability was an innovation in the following entry, Kirby's Adventure on the NES, making Kirby's Dream Land unique amongst the series. Kirby is able to inflate and hover indefinitely as per usual, which is always handy, and he can exhale an air puff to damage foes. This is particularly notable in this game in that it's a viable attack that can kill enemies instead of just damaging them slightly, which is good because otherwise his offensive capabilities are very sparse. Learning to time this air puff attack is a rewarding endeavor that gives the gameplay a little depth. I personally find his copy ability's absence quite refreshing, because you aren't able to simply find the best ability and then just cruise past all the challenges for the remainder of the game. Inhaling and spitting projectiles combined with inflating and exhaling air puffs force a bit of strategery out of you, and I found this kept me engaged throughout the game's short runtime. Other items Kirby finds are the bomb, which explodes as it flies, and the mic, which nukes the screen. The spicy food causes Kirby to spit fire for a limited time, the mint leaf causes him to spit air puffs in a similar manner, and the lollipop grants him brief invincibility. Kirby's journey begins when King Dedede swoops through Dreamland, stealing the inhabitants' food and sparkling stars. Kirby volunteers to fight his way through Dreamland to mount Dedede, returning said food and sparkling stars back to the Dreamlanders. I suppose the game's short duration makes more sense when you learn there are only 5 levels, which we'll take a look at. The thing that amazed me as I played through these stages is that everything you see here, the locations, the items and enemies, the bosses, even the music, everything reappears later in the Kirby series. Stage 1 is Green Greens, a very basic training level. The first 2 screens are straightforward left to right affairs, where it's easy to chain together inhaling one enemy and launching it at the next. The second area begins with the Bomber mini-boss, and the third area sees Kirby climbing the inside of a tree. This culminates in a fight with Wispy Woods. I wonder if he ever shows up again. Stage 2 is Castle Lololo. Definitely more interesting than Green Greens, the castle presents Kirby with several doors to enter to try to find the way forward. While that might sound maze-like, it's more like opening doors trying to find the bathroom at a friend's house. You know right away if it's the wrong door, and it won't take long for you to find what you're looking for. After riding the Warp Star about halfway through the stage, you fight Lololo. The maze-like room that follows is more dangerous due to enemies and hazards, but it shouldn't be too taxing. When you come to the end, you fight Lololo again, this time accompanied by Lololo. They don't put up much of a fight. In Stage 3's Float Islands, you start by floating across water from one island to the next. Eventually you head through a cave to a pirate ship, inside which is a Warp Star. You land right in a whale's blowhole and then get blasted up into the clouds. There you find a special mint leaf that grants Kirby shoot-'em-up controls as he battles the boss Kabula. Hey, this is the second Game Boy side-scroller with a random shoot-'em-up section. Stage 4 is the Bubbly Clouds. The cloud section feels very constricted, especially with the enemy placements. The building area is more spacious, but the following cloud area is again tight. These floating blue blobs were especially obnoxious. There follows another brief shoot-'em-up segment, mainly to top off your health, and then it's on to the mini-boss, Kracko Jr. Kirby's not very fast, so Junior's erratic movements and attacks rustled my jimmies until I figured out a safe spot to stand. After another brief shoot 'em up segment, you use some spicy food to clear out a bunch of blocks. Then you must ascend to the boss room to fight Kracko. Like his son, Kracko's movements and attacks always feel a little too unpredictable to ever feel safe. If I come in with full health, I can outdamage him and take the W. You launch your assault on the castle atop Stage 5's Mount Dedede on a warp star, blasting through the entrance. Here you face rematches against the 4 stage bosses, preceded by a level chunk themed after their stage. The bosses themselves remain the same, so let's skip ahead to the final boss, King Dedede. He sports a rather hefty health bar, but he's not too difficult to dodge and counterattack, though a series of consecutive mistakes left me at 1 hit point. And even with that scare, I was able to finish him off. You blast him off and recover the final sparkling star. Kirby then inflates to blimp size, taking the castle with him and dispensing the stolen food throughout Dreamland. After saying bye-bye, you get info on how to activate the extra game. Indeed, Sakurai wanted to give the more hardcore crowd something to beat their heads against, which is why the extra game was included. You wouldn't think traversing the same 5 stages could be made all that much more difficult, but you'd be wrong. The enemy roster has been shaken up, and both new and returning enemies are dangerous, some just moving faster and others sporting more lethal attacks. In Green Greens, the Waddle Dees are quicker, and these new fly enemies get right up in your business. The cupcakes toss frosting at you, and we have chickens instead of chicks. Both bosses and mini-bosses are revamped, gaining new attacks and generally behaving more ferociously. The bomber guy has a lunging kick and likes to dodge your projectiles. Wispy Woods now drops Gordos, and his air puff attack is harder to dodge. I'll admit to getting a game over here, it's out of control. I did push on, however, and I can attest that every level is more of the same. Unrelenting enemies and bosses that zip around and hit you from all directions and seemingly dodge most of your counterattacks. Though for some reason I found that Kracko, of all bosses, was fairly easy to cheese if you stood in the corner and knew when to jump. For your Herculean efforts of completing the extra game, you get a cast roll and an explanation of how to enter config mode, where you can modify the amount of health and number of lives Kirby begins with, as well as access the sound test. Honestly though, I can easily say it's not worth it. The extra game is such a drastic change in difficulty that it's almost like you're playing a different game, one that just feels unfair. If you disagree and enjoy the challenge, more power to you, but I'll be avoiding it moving forward. And that's really all of Kirby's Dream Land DX. Aside from extra mode, I think whether you're a big Kirby fan or just like old platformers, you'll find something of interest here. This is the origin of many aspects of the Kirby franchise, whether that be music, stages, items, enemies, or bosses, making this a fun trip back in time. It only cost you 30 minutes of your time, you can spare that. Plus, having a DX mod that feels true to the future of the series is a huge victory, and is certainly worth trying. Let me know if you like it, or recommend another bite-sized game. Thanks again for checking this out, and I hope to catch you in the next one.